Right, let's move on to the Chagos Islands, should we? Because we've not talked about it for a little while. It's back in the headlines again because Sir Keir Starmer's deal has been delayed over, well, a whole host of reasons, really, but it boils down to a lot of concerns over Chinese influence.
Yeah, back in October, Number 10 announced that it would hand over the sovereignty of the island to Mauritius, where there is a joint US and UK military base.
Well, Donald Trump's not happy. The president-elect, of course, is beginning celebrations this weekend ahead of the inauguration on Monday, but he seems to be putting his foot down.
Here in the UK, things aren't so rosy because it's revealed a record number of millionaires have fled the nation since Mr Starmer's entry into Number 10.
Yeah, last year alone, it's thought more than 10,000 millionaires left the country.
Not so good, is it? The Treasury is now facing pressure to revive the non-dom tax status amid fears that more millionaires are going to leave.
Let's talk to political commentator Tim Scott, who's here. Let's kick off with the Chagos deal, because it's been talked about but seems to be questioned for a while now. Is it dead in the water?
I think temporarily, Stephen, it is. It was on, then it was off again. So the negotiations started under the Conservatives, concluded under Labour. They're blaming each other for them apparently going wrong. So there's a vital naval anchorage there and an airfield. It's British, a bit like Ascension Island. The Americans use it as well. And we are going to pay, or we were going to pay, for the privilege of giving this away to Mauritius, which is 1,300 miles away, so they're not exactly near neighbours, are they? And a lot of concern, I think, from Washington over the closeness of Mauritius with China. And, of course, with Trump coming in, it's all in the mix now, and it's amazing how Trump's influence, even before he gets inaugurated on Monday, is apparent.
Yeah, and apparently his people have been demanding to be part of the negotiations, or they've certainly let their feelings be known.
Yes, it was rumoured that the Biden administration was relatively relaxed about the deal. The Trump administration, I think quite rightly, a lot more concerned, particularly Marco Rubio, the Florida senator, who's going to be Trump's Secretary of State, Mike Waltz, who's going to be the National Security Advisor. And, of course, Starmer wants to get on with Trump, even after all the things that they've said about him. He recognises Trump is the guy. And now it's on hold, and we'll have to see what happens. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, why was there this determination to get rid of it anyway? I mean, try and sort of hold on to Diego Garcia under a 99-year lease, but it would open territorial waters back up to China, which would be of great concern. I mean, it just seems like a crazy thing to want to do in the first place.
Well, yes, Stephen, there were concerns that China, there would be nothing to stop China building a military base on one of the neighbouring islands.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the last thing you need, isn't it? So, historically, the Chagos Islands, they've had no indigenous population. There were freed slaves who moved there. Now, to be fair, we moved them all off in the 1960s. Many of them came here. Some of them went to Mauritius, where I gather they weren't treated very well. So I think this is a sort of almost a sort of knee-jerk anti-imperialist sort of thing, following this ruling from the International Court of Justice in The Hague, a non-binding resolution, which successive governments seem to have gone with, and of course they're now blaming each other for it going wrong.
Yeah, it isn't an odd thing for a Labour government to do. You would imagine that they want to, if it deserves to be given away, then they would want to be seen to be giving it away. But I can't understand, given that we have a military base there with the Americans, why were the Americans not consulted over this?
Yes, very good point, Anne. And I think the Biden administration was rumoured to just be willing to let us get on with it. But I think it was also a bit negligent of the Biden administration. I don't know if Joe Biden was asleep at the time, but that is a base that the US uses. US planes fly. In fact, a bit like Ascension Island in the Atlantic, it's a British base, but the Americans use it more than we do. Both of those islands have got key infrastructure. We would never have retaken the Falklands in 1982 without the staging post of the Ascension Islands halfway there. And that airbase is used quite frequently by Americans. So I I don't really understand the Biden administration's casual disregard.
No, well, it's going to be an interesting one to watch and see how that unfolds. Well, our very own Bev Turner is in Washington preparing for the inauguration on Monday, and she bumped into Nigel Farage at the Stars and Stripes at the Union Jack celebration party, which took place last night, and Chagos came up for discussion.
So, Nigel, the weekend celebrations kick off with a UK-US party here tonight. This is the only ticket in town tonight. How can we keep this relationship between these countries so special when there is nobody here from the Labour Party?
Well, you're right, and in fact, many people here have said, Mandelson, are you serious? And that was said by an incoming cabinet member of the Trump regime. The other thing that's been discussed by everybody is, what the hell were you thinking about with the Chagos Islands, Diego Garcia? The honest truth is that our government is getting off to the worst possible start with the incoming Trump administration. And my other worry, if we pivot towards the European Union, that makes getting a trade deal of some kind with Trump's America even more difficult. I suggest Keir Starmer has a long, hard think over the weekend about what this relationship needs to be. Right now, the truth is, I mean, we're in a good place here tonight at this party, but in terms of the two governments, it's not very pretty.
Have a quick look at the Chagos Islands deal, because apparently it's all going to get stamped out by Trump.
Yeah, it's interesting, this. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, almost a bit of a reverse ferret, if you like, by the Labour government, because there was a time when, only a few weeks ago, they were very keen to push this through. They were looking at front-loading the deal and bunging £9 billion to Mauritius to try and get this deal through. And then somewhere along the line, I don't know why, Donald Trump appears and says, hang on a second, I'm not entirely sure about this. So what we're seeing is this kind of, I won't use the term U-turn, but certainly a shift in acknowledging that the president-elect wants to have a say over this, and that's what's going to happen. So a little bit of a shift from the Labour government regarding this. Obviously, it's a strategic island, and the concern the Telegraph is reporting is that Donald Trump has a lot of issues regarding how this might actually help China going forward with their military strategy.
Yeah. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? We're effectively giving Donald Trump a veto on UK government policy. There's no doubt that the government was desperate to try and get this over the line before Trump is inaugurated. They've had to give up. I mean, we thought even last week there might be a chance that it might be signed off by Mauritius. But then
a couple of days ago, the government said, well, you know, we're going to get approval from Trump for this deal, didn't they? Which was a very odd thing to say. No, he didn't like it.
Yeah, I think that's wildly optimistic. I mean, it does sound as though... I mean, when the deal was announced, there were murmurings out of the Trump camp, albeit he wasn't president yet, that this is a bad deal, why are you doing this? So you've got to remember as well that Starmer is desperate to be in Trump's good books. So I guess it would be a bad way to start by forcing through this deal, rushing it through before he becomes president, because you know that he doesn't like it. So, but it is quite embarrassing, I think, that you're basically, as I say, giving a foreign leader a veto over something that the government has been shouting from the rooftops. They say it's
saves £9 billion. Yeah. We could reinstate the winter fuel allowance.
Well, we could, couldn't we? But I think Kevin's right. What this does is it actually breaks open this whole area regarding the influence of Trump going forward. Because here we are, you know, it's Trump's world now. We just live in it, to coin a phrase. I mean, you know, the inauguration is on Monday. It'll be covered here on GB News. It does look like Sir Keir Starmer will just default to Trump on various issues.
Well,
How will this
impact? The Americans do have a very interesting interest, I was going to say. They have an interest in the future of those islands.
Yeah, they do.
They've got a big base there.
On the base, which we share with them, so it's not as if they don't have any interest in it at all. So, yeah, you can understand why they would have some sort of influence. Now, interestingly, the Biden administration, I remember when it was announced, there were supportive quotes from the Biden administration, so the UK government could say, well, America is on board, but Biden is history. He might still have 48 hours to go as president, but he is, to all intents and purposes, no longer the president. Trump is the future, and the government has got to basically deal with that reality. And it looks as though at this stage I would be very surprised if this deal actually ended up going ahead.